Thank you for listening to Fate Weaver, written by Elias T. Least. If you enjoy this novel, consider donating $1 through Cash App to $EliasLeast. And now, Fate Weaver. Chapter 3. Stranger. Cyrus slogged forward, his feet sinking into the mud with each step as the howling wind slammed into him. The thunderous noise of the storm deafened him, and he could barely hear his own labored breathing. His eyes stung from the relentless rain that lashed at him, blurring his vision. As he got closer to the village, the full force of the tempest bore down upon him. He saw 3 colossal funnel clouds start to spiral down from the heavens, knowing that there was no way to avoid them, and that his entire village could be devastated. The only smithy in the small village was ripped apart, as yet another lightning blast hit the open-aired building and exploded. The sheer power of the storm was awe-inspiring and terrifying all at once. Despite the danger, Cyrus pressed on, determined to reach his mother's side and ensure her safety. The 3 funnel clouds smashed into the ground with an earth-shattering boom, their swirling vortexes tearing up everything in their path. The winds howled and screamed, bending trees like reeds and ripping roofs off houses as if they were mere scraps of paper. Cyrus's heart raced as he watched in horror as the storm obliterated everything in its path. He ran past the once bustling smithy, now nothing more than a pile of twisted metal and burning debris. It was as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling, and all he could do was cling to the hope that he would reach his mother in time. Cyrus stumbled towards his humble home, his heart pounding in his chest as he saw the door flung open and the roof being peeled off like a layer of skin by the relentless wind. His mind raced as he thought of his mother's safety, and he braced himself for the worst. He pushed through the howling wind, his clothes whipping around him like torn sails, and his hair plastered to his face by the rain. He reached the threshold of the home, and the sight before him made him gasp. Cyrus blinked in disbelief as he saw a dark-cloaked figure kneeling at his mother's bedside. He took a step forward, his heart pounding with fear and confusion. Who was this stranger, and what did he want with his mother? The storm raged on outside, but inside the house a strange stillness hung in the air. The figure slowly turned his head to face Cyrus, and he saw 2 insect-like eyes glowing with an eerie blue light staring back at him from the depths of the hood. Cyrus shuddered, feeling as if he was staring directly into a nightmare. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. He felt frozen, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. The storm outside raged on, reaching a fever pitch as it ripped the roof from Cyrus's home with a deafening roar. Despite the chaos around him, Cyrus found his voice, and he yelled out to the stranger, "What are you doing? Get away from my mother!" The figure rose slowly, his cloak billowing around him like a dark cloud, and Cyrus could see the cold glimmer of a crescent moon blade in his hand. He took a step back, his heart racing with fear and uncertainty, but he refused to back down. The stranger spoke, his voice deep and gravelly. Cyrus could feel his blood turn to ice as he listened. "Your mother is safe for now." Cyrus could hear a hint of laughter in the words. He knew that he had to act fast to protect his family, but he wasn't sure he had the strength to face this dark, mysterious demon alone. The hellish creature raised a hand, his fingers curling into a claw-like shape, and suddenly, time seemed to stop. The raging storm outside was silenced. The raindrops hung in the air. Nothing moved except the man in his mother's room. The world around him seemed to fade away, leaving only the cloaked stranger and himself in this frozen moment. Cyrus stared in awe and terror, unsure of what was happening, but he knew that something profound and terrifying was unfolding. He felt the weight of the blue stone in his hand, its energy pulsing through him. He knew that he had to use it to protect his mother and his home. He clenched his fist around the stone. All he could think of was that he should have been here sooner. He needed more time. As Cyrus watched in horror, the cloaked stranger picked up his mother, his other hand still raised, and the air around them began to shimmer and distort. A sense of unreality washed over Cyrus as he saw his mother vanish into thin air, leaving him alone with this shadowy figure. He felt a scream building in his throat, but no sound escaped his lips. He was still frozen, unable to move or speak, his mind reeling with confusion and terror. The stranger turned his cold, piercing gaze on Cyrus and saw the stone in his hand. Cyrus could not see into the man's dark cowl, but he felt as if he was being dissected by those glowing alien eyes. The stranger slowly walked over to Cyrus, looked down at him, and the stone in his hand. Cyrus could almost feel the evil smile that he could not see on the demon's monstrous face. The stranger spoke, his voice carrying a hint of mockery. "You are not yet ready to face the truth, but you will be." Then he too vanished, leaving Cyrus alone in the ruins of his home. He felt a sense of emptiness wash over him. He thought the gods had blessed him, but it was obviously demons that had gripped his village. If he had to fight demons to get his mother safe, then he would fight demons. The blue stone in Cyrus's hand had begun to vibrate, and he felt a powerful energy radiating from it. Suddenly, time started to move slowly forward once again. Despite Cyrus seeing everything in extreme slow motion, he could feel a familiar charge in the air as a bolt of lightning slowly arced towards him. The air around him crackled with electricity, and for the second time that day, felt the hair on his arms standing on end. The blue stone in his hand had seemed to glow brighter as the lightning got closer, its energy pulsing through him. He had tried to move, to dodge the bolt, but he was still stuck in this demonic trap, watching the rain in front of him fall at a snail's pace. The lightning struck him with a deafening crack, and Cyrus was thrown forcefully but slowly across the room. He felt a surge of electricity shoot through his body, causing his muscles to contract involuntarily. His limbs flailed wildly as he had been hurled backwards, his body twisting and contorting in unnatural ways. His mind had raced with terror as he had felt the power of the lightning coursing through him, time moving slow enough for him to feel every nerve in his body explode, acutely aware of every sensation, every movement, every thought. He felt a searing heat wash over him as his clothes and skin had ignited from the intense heat. His senses had been overwhelmed by the deafening roar of the storm and the blinding flash of light. He felt as if he had been suspended in a moment that would last forever, caught in a timeless realm of pain and terror. For an instant, he had felt as if his body had been torn apart by the force of the lightning. He was slammed to the ground with bone-crushing force, sending shockwaves through his body. He had felt a sense of numbness wash over him as he had struggled to catch his breath, his body racked with pain. His vision blurred, and he felt his consciousness slipping away. Time began to move normally around him as the rain pelted his face and the cold wind blew against his broken and burned form. He willed his hand to raise so that he could look at the stone he had been holding, but it was no longer there. The soft blue light, however, had melted into his palm, and it was slowly spreading up his arm. He didn't have the energy to fight it, and he was quite sure that the demon had come back to get him. Right before he lost consciousness, he heard a steady female voice that seemed to come from all around him. Control system activated. Analyzing new user request. Chapter 4. The Demon's Voices. Cyrus opened his eyes to a stunningly beautiful day, with the sun shining bright and the gentle breeze bringing the scent of fresh rain. But as he looked around, he realized that he was no longer in the comfort of his own bed. His home was destroyed, the roof ripped off, and the walls partially collapsed. The realization hit him hard. He remembered the demonic figure that had taken his mother during the storm. His heart raced with fear and grief, and he wondered if he was next. But he refused to let the darkness take hold of him. He took a deep breath, his mind racing with the realization that he had to act quickly to save his fellow villagers. Cyrus pushed aside his sorrow and rose to his feet, determined to do whatever it takes to protect his community from further destruction. As Cyrus assessed the damage, he heard a faint chime. At first he thought it was just his imagination, a result of the intense emotions he was experiencing. But then a voice echoed through his mind that was clear and unmistakable. "Greetings, Cyrus," the voice announced. "A villager requires assistance, and there is a primary quest available for you to undertake. You have the option to save more villagers for bonus rewards. Do you accept the quest?" After hearing the voice inside his head, Cyrus tried to ignore it, afraid that it could be a trick of the demons that had taken his mother. He felt a chill run down his spine as he heard the voice coming from everywhere but from nowhere. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that every move he made was being scrutinized. Cyrus struggled to stand up, his muscles weak and his body trembling. He was certain that he should be dead after being struck by lightning twice, but to his surprise he had no serious injuries. He felt a surge of relief and gratitude wash over him, but he knew that he couldn't afford to waste any more time. He had to move quickly to help his fellow villagers, to ensure that they were safe and protected. As Cyrus made his way through the ruins of the village, he heard a moaning sound coming from one of the collapsed houses. He ran towards the sound, his heart racing with fear and determination. As he got closer, he saw that Alma, the woman who had lived next door to him his entire life, was trapped under a heavy wooden beam that had fallen from the roof. She was moaning in pain, and Cyrus knew that he had to act fast if he was going to save her. He rushed over to her side, his heart pounding in his chest, and assessed the situation. As he saw the elderly woman that had helped him and his mother so often, the voice inside his head once again repeated its message. "Greetings, Cyrus. A villager requires assistance and there is a primary quest available for you to undertake. You have the option to save more villagers for bonus rewards. Do you accept the quest?" But this time, as he listened, he felt a sharp pain in his temples, as if his head was being split in two. He stumbled, grabbing his head with both hands, and cried out in pain. For a moment he thought he was going to collapse. "Yes, yes, demons! I am going to help save the villagers. Get out of my head!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the ruins of the house. Alma, still lying on the ground, heard Cyrus's words, and despite her pain and discomfort, was momentarily taken aback. She wondered if the storm had driven him insane, but then she saw the look of determination on his face and knew that he meant what he said. She reached out to him, her hand shaking slightly. "Cyrus, please," she gasped, her voice weak. "Help me." Cyrus heard her plea and rushed over to her side. Cyrus slowly made his way towards Alma, who lay trapped beneath the crushing weight of a massive beam. He strained every muscle in his body, desperately attempting to lift the beam off her, but it refused to move. Alma's face was contorted with pain, and Cyrus knew he had to find a way to save her. Suddenly the voice in his head chimed in. "Your strength is currently insufficient for this task. Employing a leverage tool is recommended." Cyrus's heart ached as he gazed at Alma, his thoughts still consumed by the devastating loss of his mother. He struggled to maintain his composure, but the overwhelming feeling of loneliness and despair made it nearly impossible. "The demons taunt me," he whispered, his voice quivering as a solitary tear trickled down his cheek. "They call me weak." Alma's eyes met Cyrus's grief-stricken face, and she recognized the immense pain he was enduring. She knew that he had been through so much, and that he needed someone to help him rediscover his inner strength. "It's okay, Cyrus," she murmured softly, her voice a soothing balm. "You're not weak. You're just a child who has experienced a harrowing night. But you're also a brave and compassionate young man determined to aid his fellow villagers. And that's what truly counts." As Cyrus absorbed Alma's words, the seeds of hope and resilience began to sprout within him, giving him the courage to face the challenges that lay ahead. Together, they would confront the shadows of the past and forge a new path towards healing and redemption. Cyrus looked at her, his eyes shining with gratitude. He knew that she was right, and that he had to find a way to overcome his doubts and fears. "Okay," he said, his voice stronger now. "I'll find a tool to move the beam. A big board or a stick, right?" Alma nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "That's right," she said. "And I know that you can do it, Cyrus. I believe in you." Cyrus smiled back, feeling a renewed sense of determination. He looked around for something to use as a lever, and spotted a long, sturdy piece of wood nearby that had fallen from the wall during the storm. He grabbed it, and with all his might, levering the beam off Alma. She crawled out from under the debris, her body bruised and battered, but alive. "Thank you, Cyrus," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for saving me." Cyrus smiled, feeling a sense of pride and relief wash over him. He knew that he still had a lot of work to do, but he also knew that he had the strength and the determination to see it through. As Cyrus ran out of Alma's destroyed home, he once again heard the voice speak. Primary quest completed, allowing extra time for secondary quest. Cyrus wasn't sure what the demons meant by a secondary quest, but he knew that he had to keep going. He looked around once again, scanning the ruined buildings for any signs of life. Chapter 5. Minimum System Requirements. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning wood and the stench of smoke that pervaded the entire area. In the distance, flickering flames cast eerie shadows on the ruins of the village. The scene was both overwhelming and heartbreaking, as Cyrus knew there were still people in need of help. Cyrus's heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination as he took a deep breath and set out into the ruined village. He couldn't ignore the screams of his fellow villagers pleading for help. His sense of responsibility and compassion propelled him forward, even though he knew he couldn't save everyone. As he moved through the destruction, he assessed each situation, seeking out those who were in the direst need of his help. His new knowledge of levers proved invaluable when he rushed to the aid of an elderly man trapped under a collapsed roof. The man's frail body was covered in dust, and his eyes were wide with terror. Cyrus's muscles strained as he lifted the heavy debris, feeling the heat from the flames growing closer. Cyrus knew he couldn't waste any time. After rescuing the elderly man, he continued to search for others in need. He waded through the rubble, coughing and gasping for air. The screams of the wounded and dying only grew louder, but he stayed focused, driven by his desire to help. Finally, as the flames grew closer, Cyrus found a woman lying unconscious beneath a pile of debris. Her body was mangled, and her face was twisted in pain. Despite the overwhelming horror of the scene, Cyrus remained calm and focused, carefully lifting the debris and cradling the woman in his arms. He carried her to safety, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he couldn't save everyone, but grateful for the lives he could help. Cyrus's quick thinking and determination proved to be invaluable as he helped a young girl who was stranded on the top floor of a crumbling building. He constructed a makeshift bridge to get her to safety, each step adding to his renewed sense of faith in himself. As the sun began to set over the ruined village, Cyrus surveyed the damage around him. The village was still in shambles, but he had managed to save many of its inhabitants from certain death. Despite the enormity of the task, he felt a sense of accomplishment and pride in what he had achieved. Finally, Cyrus felt he could slow down, knowing that he had done everything he could to help. However, just as he was about to relax, a chime rang out, and a female voice spoke to him once again. "Congratulations, primary quest complete. Congratulations, secondary quests successful. Experience cannot be distributed. System user does not meet basic attribute requirements." Cyrus halted abruptly in the middle of the road, trying to make sense of the voice in his head, but the words were distorted and muddled, almost as if they were originating from some faraway world. He strained to comprehend the message, but the language was incomprehensible, and the source was unknown. "What are you trying to tell me, demons?" Cyrus screamed, his frustration and confusion boiling over. "Why can't you speak in a language I can understand?" Despite his outburst, the voices in his head grew more insistent, filling his mind with strange, incomprehensible words and images. Meanwhile, a large hunting party had returned to the village situated in the shadow of the mountain. They had spotted the storm from afar and had hastened back, knowing the damage would be extensive. The hunters made their way through the village, surveying the destruction wrought by the storm. Cyrus's inner turmoil continued, making him feel like he was losing his grip on reality. The demons in his head refused to quiet down, and their constant noise made it difficult for him to concentrate. As he stood in the middle of the road, he suddenly became aware of the hunting party moving through the village, and he wondered if they could help him make sense of the chaos. Word of Cyrus's heroic efforts had quickly spread through the village, and the elder, the leader of the community, had learned of his selfless acts. The elder gathered a group of wise ones and set out to congratulate Cyrus for his bravery. When they found him, he was standing in the middle of the street, screaming at the demons in his head. The elder knew that they needed to act fast and prepare a ceremony to help Cyrus before they lost another life in the aftermath of the tragic storm. As the hunters drew closer, Cyrus's anxiety level skyrocketed. He was a mess, with black soot smudged all over his face, streaking down his cheeks and into his eyes. His clothes were ragged, torn, and burnt, soaked with both his own blood and that of the people he had tried to save. Chunks of his hair were missing, burned off in the lightning strikes. To make matters worse, he was standing in the middle of a muddy street, screaming at invisible demons that only he could hear. He felt trapped in a never-ending nightmare, unable to find a way out of the mental labyrinth that he had been thrust into. Suddenly, the pictures in Cyrus's mind came to a halt, and the voice in his head spoke once again. Control system adjusting user attributes for minimum requirements. 24-hour reset required. Starting in 10, 9, 8, 7, it said, leaving Cyrus feeling even more confused and disoriented. The elder approached Cyrus slowly, his arms open wide in a non-threatening gesture. "It's okay, Cyrus. Can you tell me what's happening?" he asked, his eyes filled with genuine concern. Cyrus's fear and confusion made it difficult for him to articulate what was going on. So much had happened to him. He had been struck by lightning twice. His mother had been kidnapped by demons. A strange stone melted into his arm, and he was battling some dark force in his mind that was driving him insane. How could he even begin to explain something like that? "The demons," Cyrus stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "They have taken my mother, and they are inside me." Before anyone could say or do anything, the voice in Cyrus's head continued. 3, 2, 1, reset commencing. And with that, Cyrus's brain shut down completely, and he collapsed in the middle of the muddy street, unconscious. Thank you for listening to Fate Weaver by Elias T. Least. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for exclusive original works from this author. All donations and proceeds from this work go directly to him. Cash App $EliasLeast. Copyright 2023.